So I'm in the attic and I want to put this toaster into long-term storage, but there's a problem with that. Attics are very dusty places. Dust can accumulate everywhere, on every surface, including toasters, which is a problem because dust will eventually accumulate in here. So, why is having your toaster's bread holes filled with dust a bad thing? You see these heating elements here? They obviously get hot to cook the bread. And, well, when dust gets hot, it burns. And when dust burns, it does not smell good. And that's exactly what happened to us with this very toaster. When we retrieved it from the attic to replace the old toaster, which broke, it was full of dust. And when we went to turn it on, the dust burned and the whole kitchen smelled like burnt dust. Now, the reason I am putting the toaster back up here is because we got a new toaster to replace the old one. This toaster only has the capacity to cook 2 slices of bread at a time, while the old toaster that broke had the capacity to cook 4 at a time. So we needed another toaster that could cook 4 at a time, which we've got one now, which is why this one's going back into the attic. But in between the time that the old toaster broke and the time that we bought a new toaster, we needed to cook bread. And that's why we had to get the backup toaster out of the attic. Before you start doing stuff to the toaster, first check to make sure the crumb tray is empty. If it's not, well, empty it. Now that your crumb tray is empty, you can start doing stuff to the toaster without worrying about the crumbs spilling out. I know it does look like there are crumbs in here, but like they're literally glued to it and they're not going anywhere, so you don't have to worry about like crumbs falling out if they're adhered to it, basically. In order to make sure the mistakes of the past are never repeated, I will be blocking off these bread holes so dust can't get into them. One way of doing that is with this crumb tray. You can put the crumb tray over the top of the bread holes, and lots of toasters have crumb trays, so you're probably going to have a crumb tray on your toaster. But if you don't want to do this because you're scared the crumb tray might get lost if you store it up here, or you previously lost your crumb tray already, then you can use other objects such as paper or cardboard, or really anything that fits on the top. With paper and cardboard, they're kind of light, so you might want to put stuff on them to lay it down. But if you don't have any spare objects on hand to obstruct the toaster's bread holes, what you want to do is use the toaster to block its own bread holes by turning it upside down. And now, no dust can get into the toaster because you see the dust, when it accumulates, it comes from the top and lands in the toaster. But since the bread holes are under here, the dust can't get in. Now, you see, there's a problem with this solution, and that is these vents here. Dust will accumulate in these vents, and since these vents lead inside the toaster, they don't lead into the bread holes, but they do lead into spots near the bread holes, which will get hot when the toaster turns on and burn the dust and create that gross smell. So, if you're lucky enough to have a toaster with no vents on the bottom, you're fine, you can use this optimal solution. But for everyone else, we're going to have to take a lot less optimal solution, and that is turning it sideways. The reason why we have to turn it sideways is because, well, you see, when dust falls, it goes straight down. Which means it won't get inside the toaster because it won't be able to go like this. Or like this, because like the dust can only fall straight down. Now the reason it only falls straight down is because we're in an attic, and there's no wind in an attic, which means that it will be fine to store it sideways. But if you have like air moving around in your attic, this can be a problem because the dust will be able to now move sideways and get inside the toaster, which is a problem if you're storing it sideways, which is why storing it upside down is an optimal solution. Another solution is wedging the toaster between 2 boxes like so. It fixes the dust problem but brings in new problems such as lack of stability, like this box might fall over because the toaster isn't really a stable surface. This problem has been mitigated by the fact that it's in between another box and this support beam, so it can't really move around much. But this does not really get rid of the problem of hard to access. The toaster is hard to access because it's got a box on top of it. So, if you have nothing to put on top of your toaster, you have air movement, and your toaster has vents in the bottom, what do? Well, you could do this. This will minimize the amount of dust getting in. It won't get rid of it entirely because this end is still exposed, but this end isn't. and this is the bread hole end of the toaster, and you don't want dust going into the bread hole. The dust will come into direct contact with the heating element, and when you turn it on, it will make the dust burn and smell weird. This end still has the openness problem, but it's not as bad because even though the dust will get in here and get heated up and smell weird, it won't be as bad because then the dust in here isn't in direct contact with the heating elements. There are some things you should know about this solution, such as if you have a toaster with slanted edges like this one, it will mean that the toaster's bread hole end will not be in like perfect contact with whatever surface you have decided to place it against. In this case, a box. You can use a wall, really anything, which means that the seal isn't perfect, but it doesn't really have to be perfect. You're only just trying to stop a lot of dust building up. If there's a little bit of wind going into the toaster, it's fine as long as the dust buildup is negligible. Taking things to the next level, wedge the toaster between two boxes because now this end is sealed and this end is sealed. Well, this end is almost perfectly sealed because the legs of the toaster will stop you from creating a perfectly flush connection with the toaster and the box, meaning if there's wind, some dust is going to get into your toaster. Now, if your toaster does not have vents on the bottom, you don't need to worry about any of this. Just store it upside down, you'll be fine. But this solution is still pretty cool, since if you store the toaster off the ground like so, bugs will not be able to get into it very easily, which means you don't have to worry about bugs being in your toaster as much. What makes this solution even cooler is that while both ends are sealed because it's sandwiched in between two boxes, you can still easily grab it. Unlike one of the previous solutions where I showed, the toaster was sandwiched between two boxes, but you couldn't easily access it. Having the toaster sandwiched sideways between two boxes will fix this issue. To recap, if you don't have any objects to put on top of your toaster, store it upside down. If your toaster has vents in the bottom of it, store it sideways. If there's air movement, wedge it between two vertical surfaces. If wedging it between two vertical surfaces isn't an option, just have it in contact with only one vertical surface. Preferably have the bread hole covered. If this is not possible, you have two options. Your first option is to just store your toaster sideways without anything obstructing its holes. Now, wind will blow dust into your toaster, but this is better than storing it right side up, since less dust would get in. Your second option is to store the toaster upside down, despite the fact that it has vents on the bottom of it. Like the previous solution, this is undesirable, but is better than storing your toaster right side up. And with that, the video is done. So goodbye for now, or forever.